Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm strangely excited that I get to do the message when we open with Leviticus. And I probably wouldn't have said that 20 years ago, but it's pretty cool. So, this parsha is Vayikra. It means he called. And a lot of you guys know this. A lot of this information gets repeated every year, but traditionally, does anyone know what age a child would begin the study of Torah? Anyone remember? 5 years old. Yep. And does that would begin with Genesis, right? No. Well, if not Genesis, when? You guys do know all the answers. Leviticus. Leviticus doesn't really tell any stories or history. There's really no scandals in there. Also, another fact, this apparently has been a long-standing tradition to start around 5 years old, and specifically with Leviticus. So go back 2,000 years, there was a nice Jewish boy. His name was Yeshua. So when he turned 5, it's conceivable that he would have also began his earthly study of Torah in Leviticus, just like we're doing today. So Baruch Hashem. Let's see, a little more history. A Babylonian rabbi from the early 3rd century said, why would young children begin study of Torah with the book of Leviticus and not Genesis? Surely it is because young children are pure, and the sacrifices are also pure. So let the pure come and engage in the study of pure, or the pure. So again, there's not a scandal here in Leviticus. Yeah, it's dry. What seemingly from the outside seem like dry details, list and whatnot, but it is pure. So let's look at Leviticus a bit. Leviticus 1:2, it opens, speak to the people of Israel, say to them, when any of you brings an offering to Adonai, you may bring your animal offering either from the herd or from the flock. So I'm sure we've all heard, though, that God doesn't really like the sacrifices anymore, right? And these sacrifices, they were more like punishment, right? We've heard that before as well. I don't know if I agree with that. Well, I don't agree with that. But you could say that God does hate religious rituals when they're performed hypocritically, without the right heart. And that would include anything we do today, anything we do on Monday, right? If we're doing it with the wrong spirit and the wrong heart, the Father is not going to be pleased with that. Moving on, Isaiah 1:11, and I know we've read scriptures like this today. A lot of what I'm going to say is a repeat. Why are all these sacrifices offered to me, asked Adonai? I'm fed up with burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fattened animals. I get no pleasure from the blood of bulls, lambs, and goats. So again, our Father then, now, and forevermore, He cares about our heart first and foremost. But He does care about our actions too. So we can't just say, I have warm fuzzies about this, so it must be good. Well, no, what we do does kind of make a difference. And there's plenty of examples, but think about when King Saul was supposed to go out and destroy the Amalekites. We just went through Purim, that was a big mistake to not do what God had said. But he brought the king back, some women back, and some of the animals, but the way I read it, it's like all the good stuff we brought back. Exactly what God said don't do. And Saul lost the kingship over that incident. And so obedience is better than sacrifice. So heart and action. Judah helped me remember this verse this week. It's nice to have nice young men in the house that are smarter than their dad, and I love it. It's great. They can keep going. So Psalm 51:18 through 21. And the proclaim was a little fussy about this, so I don't know how it's going to look exactly. But this is King David after the Bathsheba incident, right? And David's speaking to the Father. He says, "For you don't want sacrifices, or I would give them. You don't take pleasure in burnt offerings. My sacrifice to God is a broken spirit. God, you won't spurn a broken, chastened heart. In your good pleasure, make Zion prosper. Rebuild the walls of Jerusalem or Yerushalayim. It's pretty big then. Then you will delight in righteous sacrifices, in burnt offerings, and whole burnt offerings. Then they will offer bulls on your altar. So, again, first step, a humble heart, essentially a righteous heart, right? Then comes the action. Then God says, hey, I do like your sacrifices. I like your offerings. I like the way that you're trying to draw near to me. And in modern terms, in the absence of temple, that could take many, many forms. Even the study of Torah, the study of Leviticus, I have a quote way here somewhere in my notes, but I'll just jump to it. It is an act of, the act of studying is, in a sense, like you're making the offering by not just saying, well, that's done, that's over, that's boring, I don't want you. I think, according to at least one person's view, that, hey, that's honoring God by even studying and trying to learn about it. Let's see here. So Yeshua, and we read it in the Brit Hadashah today, Yeshua mentioned sacrifices at the Sermon on the Mount. And I didn't notice that he was telling people to abandon the sacrifices. Matthew 23 and 24, so if you are offering your gift at the temple altar, in the complete Jewish Bible, and nothing wrong with the TLV version, but it says, I think, just altar. Well, in our minds, and especially our Western minds, we think, well, altar could be anywhere, any place. No, it's very specific, the altar in the temple, not just random altar on the side of the road or some hilltop. So if you're offering your gift at the temple altar and you remember there that your brother has something against you, leave your gift where it is by the altar and go and make peace with your brother. Then abandon the sacrificial system? No, he says, then come back and offer your gift. So anyway, that's I've probably hit enough hornet's nest for the first few minutes. Leviticus 1 and 3, if his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he must offer a male without defect. He is to bring it to the entrance of the tent of the meeting so that it can be accepted by Adonai. So the word offering is korban. Yeah, I did, but in korban, we might say, oh, a sacrifice or altering, but more accurately, the translation korban means come close or draw near. Okay? And that makes a big difference when you look at it in that context. A korban helps you draw near. And it's used over and over and over again in this parsha and throughout Leviticus. Again, the Hebrew root of this word means to come close or draw near, representing the historic Jewish understanding of what an offering was. And that is an opportunity to draw near to God. The meaning of korban then should be an object, the sacrifice itself, that helps the worshiper draw closer to God. That's the point. The Lord spoke to Moses of basically 5 categories of sacrifices, and there's lots of little subcategories inside those categories. And I mean, I'll get us out of here by 12:30, I'm sure. So anyway, we're going to try to go through them. We're going to try to honor God's word and not just skip through things. And maybe it won't be a wow, amazing experience, but it's good to review it and look at it. As I was researching, studying, as someone pointed out that, we want to talk about Yeshua's sacrifice. Perhaps we should also look at the sacrifices we see in the Torah and say, well, what's sacrifice about? What does it mean to draw near to God? What is this korban? So the first one is burnt offering, the olah, then grain offerings, the mincha, peace offering, shalamim, sin offering, hatat, and guilt offering, asham. And we'll go through each of those briefly. So the burnt offering, you could say korban olah, and olah means that which rises. So korban olah would mean a sacrifice that rises. So whoever brought an animal as an olah offering completely surrendered it to God. It was completely burnt up. There was no physical, tangible benefit, right? He didn't get to keep any part of the animal. A lot of the other sacrifices, you would burn some on the altar. The priest would get a portion, and then you would get the majority of that sacrifice actually back. So he didn't get to keep the animal. He didn't get to have a shared meal with anyone. It was completely burned up on the altar. The offering would rise to heaven as a sweet savor before the Lord. So, in some respects, the olah represents a complete and total surrender to God. You brought him something, you gave all of that something to God, you get nothing tangible back in return. Of course, we always know that we get back something back from God better than a tangible return. Grain offering. The grain offering was the only vegan offering in God's 5 main categories. You got flour, you've got oil and frankincense, and then some, it's just plain flour and nothing else. So the King James Version calls it a meat offering, but that was, of course, you only have to read it for a second to realize that was just older lingo. But just in case you get confused, it's referring to grain or flour. Leviticus 2:1. Daniel's going to have a talk with me after the service. When anyone brings a sacrifice offering of grain to Adonai, his offering should be of fine flour, and he is to pour oil on it and put frankincense on it. The grain offering, the mincha offering, would be translated as a gift or a tribute. So not grain or meat, but really a gift offering. Yes, it's flour, but specifically translates as a gift or tribute. Just like the burnt offering, the mincha offering was not a penalty for sin. A worshiper brought a grain offering as a free will gift to God. It was 100% voluntary. Okay? Grain offerings could be brought along with other offerings, so you could be doing an offering that did involve an animal, but also bring an additional grain offering with it. Or if you couldn't afford an animal, you maybe could bring a pair of doves or something like that. But if you couldn't afford that, even you could bring a grain offering. You could substitute the grain for an animal. So there's no blood in grain if you do it right. Right? So just keep that in mind. You can bring a grain offering as a substitute for an animal sacrifice if you couldn't afford an animal. That's an interesting thing to remember. Let's see here. Peace offerings. Number 3, Leviticus 3:1. If his offering is a sacrifice of peace offerings, then if he offers before Adonai an animal from the herd, then no matter whether it is male or female, it must be without defect. Peace offering translates to shalomim. Shalomim is related to shalom, peace. A peace offering was also a voluntary offering. They were not brought as a penalty for sin or to earn forgiveness for sin. There was lots of different types of peace offerings, but the peace offering was, in essence, a shared meal between the father. Remember, the choice fats were burned up on the altar. But also the priesthood. The priesthood got to keep a portion of that. And then the majority of the animal was returned to the person making the offering. And to help you visualize it, the Passover lamb was a peace offering, right? So you would take the lamb once it was slaughtered. God would get a portion burned on the altar. The priest would get a portion, and then you would carry the rest back to eat it alone when no one's looking. No. You basically are going to have a feast with the people you love, your family, your friends, your neighbors, right? Maybe some people you don't love. But it was meant to be shared together. So it was a communal meal between the Father, the priesthood, and you and your family. So let's see. So we've gotten through 3 of these so far, and so far, not one of them is for sin. Not one of them is to pay for a sin. But now, let's get to the sin offering, also known as chatat. Leviticus 4:1 and 2. Adonai said to Moshe, "Tell the people of Israel, if anyone sins inadvertently against any of the mitzvot of Adonai concerning things which should not be done, if he does any one of them." By the way, even today, and of course our legal system is based on the Torah, we want to forget it, or not we, but people want to forget about that. But everyone knows, except for that 2 or 3 guys, that ignorance of the law is no excuse, right? You can't say, well, I didn't see the sign that said 55, and watch me get a ticket today. But anyway, I hope not. You can't say, well, I didn't see it, so I was going 90. No. Well, too bad. You get a ticket, a bad one. So the same was true in the Torah, right? Hey, maybe you didn't mean it. You didn't mean anything by it. But if you do something wrong and it causes harm to God or your neighbor, then it's a problem. Let's see. So there were different types of sin offerings, and depending on who you were, what your station in life was, would determine what you would bring as a sin offering. So the high priest, for example, would bring a bull. Well, even today, if you go try to buy a whole cow or a bull or a steer, it's a lot of money. If it was the whole community, also a bull. If it was a leader like a king, what was it? It wasn't a bull. It was a male goat. So it's kind of quite a drop down there. How about the average Israelite? Bull, male goat? Well, it was a female goat or lamb. We always think male, 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 male. Well, and I can tell you from my little bit of farming that generally the male of the species is going to be bigger, stronger, more muscly. It's going to be more valuable. So anyway, can't afford any of those though. You could bring a pair of doves. And as I mentioned earlier, still can't afford those. Some plain flour then. So, okay. So what's kind of breaks your brain, or at least mine, and it doesn't take much, the sin offering was not a penalty for sinning. Right? The offering you brought wasn't a penalty. Instead, it was a means of spiritual purification after sin had already been confessed and it had already been repented of and forgiven. So, the offering itself was, not to diminish it, that was the sort of the cherry on top in a sense, right? You had to do a lot of other things before you would get to that point. God expected a lot more. Remember about all the offerings he was tired of, your sacrifices? Is if you didn't have the other things done first, if you hadn't acknowledged your sin, confessed your sin, repented of your sin, tried to make somehow make your sin right, then that offering wasn't going to do it, right? You couldn't just sort of say, hey, I gave some wheat, we're good, right? No, we're not good. You have to have the right heart. So, let's see. And sin offerings for sin, right? Not always. So just to mix it up, sometimes sin offerings were required when a sin wasn't committed. How can that be? I don't have the scriptures up, but I'll cite them for you. So Leviticus 12:6, a woman after childbirth had to bring a sin offering. Is it a sin to bring life into this world? No, it's absolutely not. Now, if he did it to himself, I think I heard you say this morning, just by chance, leprosy, lashon hara, like an evil tongue, you might get leprosy. Think of Miriam and yeah. But also it was contagious by contact. So it's conceivable that you could be a leper, then be healed of your leprosy. Well, the Torah requires that you bring a sin offering. So you have to go show yourself to the priest and make an offering. That's Leviticus 14:19. Number 6:11, a Nazirite who comes into contact with the corpse. Not on purpose, just accidentally it could happen. That's number 6:11, yeah. Number 6:14, a Nazirite who completed the term of his vow. Now, I did not complete my Nazirite vow, and I don't suggest you make one, because to complete a Nazirite vow, you have to have a functioning in-place temple to also make vows and also bring sacrifices. And we have a good example of that. And Paul had taken a Nazirite vow, and people accused him of teaching against the Torah and circumcision for Jews. So they said, hey, if you're going to do the vow, take 4 other Jews with you to complete their vow and pay for what was required to complete that vow. So anyway, yeah, a sin offering doesn't necessarily mean that a sin has been committed. So what is it then? If it's not a sin offering, but sometimes it's for people that, I don't get it. It should be at its heart considered a purification offering. Again, that's why all the heart matters matter beforehand. The offering was the culmination of that, so that you could be purified. All the footing for that already had to be in place. So yeah, purification after sin had already been confessed and repented of and forgiven. All right, so that's 3 offerings that aren't related to sin. 1 that perhaps is mostly related to sin, but not completely. Then we have the 5th category, which is the guilt offering, or asham. So the asham offering covers if you refuse to give sworn testimony, right? You witnessed a crime, and you're like, hey, I don't want to get involved. I'm not going to bring testimony. If you touched a dead lizard, okay? Don't keep an oath. If you misuse a sacred object. It also deals with situations like theft, extortion, swearing falsely, or the good old finders keepers rule, which is not a valid rule, right? It's just in case you didn't know. You misunderstood in kindergarten. If you find something, it's not yours, right? You're actually obligated to try to find the owner. So apparently that was a problem all the way back in the beginning of time, that someone finds something and say, hey, no one's around, it's laying there, now it's mine. God's like, no, don't do that. So if you've done that, then you need to do something about it. You can't hope that God just sort of brushes it under the rug. So the laws of the guilt offering teach that an offense toward another person is also an offense towards God. When we cheat or damage or misuse others or their property, it's just like we cheated or damaged and misused God. So the guilt offering helps us settle up with God, so to speak, although I use that phrase very loosely, but also make it right with the person we've harmed by restoring the full value of the property. That's a principle, again, that's in our modern law. It's a really good principle. Basically, let's say you caused the death of someone's ox, or you stole their ox. Well, you need to return the ox. If the ox is gone, you need to return the equivalent value of that ox. And then you need to add 1/5, 20%, on top of that. So you need to make restitution for the loss that you've caused your neighbor. So that's the 5 basic categories. The Torah does not say that the sacrifice, again referring to the guilt offering, that the sacrifice takes away the sin, but it does say that if a man confesses the sin, repents, makes reparation, and seeks atonement before the Lord. Leviticus 5:26 sums it up. He will be forgiven in regard to whatever it was he did that made him guilty. Okay? So, again, you can't just say, what's the price for this? What's the price for that? How much is it going to cost me, God, for adultery? Here's a bull. No, that's not how it works. So, again, it's your heart has to be right. And again, it's not about money. If you don't have the money, a little bit of flour is fine. But the high price, or the price you need to pay, is before the sacrifice itself. So what have we learned? This, again, an oversimplification, but some things to remember about the sacrifices. The different types of sacrifices have different meanings. They're not sort of just one big blob of Old Testament stuff, right? It's very specific, and for specific people, and it's for specific situations. Not all the sacrifices are sin offerings. Again, 2 out of 5 are directly related to sin, the others are not. The sacrifices were a means for drawing near to the inapproachable God within his holy temple on earth. And most of the sacrifices, they're more like gifts. They're not like penalties. That was always my perception, right? Like, oh, you got to pay the price. Yes, there's a price to be paid, but that was not the point of it. It was not to penalize. So, another fun thing to keep in mind, in case you forget, 40 years after the death of Yeshua, the Jewish people, including the apostles, continued to offer sacrifices in the temple, and we have that documented in our canonized scriptures, right? And it wasn't playing Jewish dress up. It wasn't doing it to say, well, we just need to kind of pretend until we get these people Christianized, and then we'll drop the system, right? No, that's not what they were doing. But keep in mind, too, that the temple on earth was God's plan. He wanted to do it. He designed it. He was very specific about it. But it is not the only temple. There's a temple in heaven, right? So the earthly temple is a shadow of the heavenly reality of the temple above. So the sacrifices that you would do on earth were also shadows of a greater, higher, and holier spiritual worship in the heavenly sanctuary. So, unfortunately, I sort of I guess I did run out of time. I also just ran out of space. When you get to 10 pages, you know you've already written too much. So maybe this needs to be a two-parter perhaps sometime. But think about the sacrifices. What are the goals of the sacrifices? It's for purification and the draw near. And without getting into, the details of Yeshua, what's the sort of general purpose, right? Why did he die for us? Why was his blood shed for us? Why did he suffer for us? It was so that we could draw near to him and draw near to the Father. So in that sense, and again, thinking about what's the point of sacrifices, we need to study the sacrifices of the temple because we need to understand what God's doing, because he does things in patterns. God invented 4D chess, so he kind of knows how the ripples on the pond are going to manifest. So, probably need to talk about that some more some other time. But let me read you, and I don't like to just sort of read on and on and on, but sometimes that's what I'm going to do. So I want to read you some quotes from people. I think this is, by the way, all this information is available to all of us in many forms, but Daniel Lancaster wrote, "What about the sacrifices?" There's probably a copy of it back there. It's really great. You know, I love the giant book volumes, but I get a bit intimidated by that or demotivated by that. This is a little book, and it's loaded with information, and it's really more concise and a lot of information packed in there. And then also I look back, folks that have been around for a while, what was the Torah study, Judah, I need Mom. Nope. Oh, nope. Shadows of Messiah. Yeah. I looked at that as well because it's like, okay, this is some high fiber Torah here. It is a little bit hard to, think, well, the temple's not here. It doesn't apply. How are we going to look at this? But Yeshua is woven throughout it all, and it's not a square peg in a round hole. No, it fits just perfectly in there. So, but let me read you this, and then we'll be finished. So, whether or not we approve of the rituals or think they are rational is irrelevant. Speaking about God's sacrifices, God did, in fact, ordain them. Right? He wasn't just bored and he saw white paper and he thought he should fill it up with some random stuff. No, he was very specific. He wanted to do it. Therefore, we should be less concerned about why sacrifice was or is necessary, and more concerned with what God intends to communicate to us by our obedience to his commandments. Of course, without a tabernacle or temple, the laws of sacrifice seem largely irrelevant. it is not practical for us to keep any of these commandments in our time. To make, and this is interesting to remember, to make a sacrifice today would in itself violate the laws of God's Torah. It was only for the temple in Jerusalem, right? You can, if you go out and burn up a goat on a pile of rocks, I mean, that's not what God wants you to do. He's like, it's very specific. I want it to be done in the place that I shall choose, which is Jerusalem. So to make a sacrifice today in itself violate the laws of God's Torah. Nevertheless, the study of the sacrifices from a messianic perspective does reconcile apparent discrepancies between the Scriptures. It helps us understand what they're talking about in Hebrews at different places when we understand the original sort of purpose of the sacrifices. It also helps us reconcile apparent discrepancies in the Scriptures and could correct some theological errors. But it brings glory to our Master, and he did lay down his life as a living sacrifice on our behalf. So I mentioned earlier, I found that quote I mentioned earlier. I love you guys. It's Rabbi Yitzhak said, what is the significance of the verses in Leviticus that he's referring to that say, this is the law of the sin offering, and this is the law of the guilt offering? They teach that any man who occupies himself with the study of the laws of the sin offering is regarded as if he was offering a sin offering. And any man who occupies himself with the study of the laws of the guilt offering is regarded as though he was offering a guilt offering. Now, you may disagree with that, but that's, again, you literally cannot properly bring those offerings to God today. If you decided this is right, this is what I should do, you still can't do it. But study it, learn about it, talk about it, when you lie down, when you arise, and I think God's pleased with that. But again, the main point to remember, the point of Yeshua's sacrifice is the same as the original sacrifices, which is to draw near to God. So with that, I'll say Shabbat Shalom.